Hello, as usual, but what I have to do now is I have to work my way around the far end of the drum kit. All my stuff here. Just got these sticks from Musician's Friend. They're supposed to be hickory. I think they're maple. I don't know. I do love Musician's Friend. We'll sort that out. All right. Practicing to a metronome. I remember, for a long time, sometimes in drum books, and I'm not going to get too big a diatribe about this, but the point being is sometimes instead of just thinking about, okay, I have to practice this number 28 in stick control, I'll do it slow to fast, fastest, do it open, close, and I'll practice in all these different tempos, which is extremely important. Sometimes if it can be, for people who are more ADD-ish, spazzy-ish like me, or see music maybe a little differently, maybe more emotionally than sort of like it's just notes. You know what I mean, like on a piece of paper, like a clock. Practicing to a metronome, sometimes it helps if you kind of invent a melody in your head and then put the metronome on and then practice to it, but at a slower tempo. So any rudiments, like I'm totally half-assed in rudiments, right? I mean, I am. But it's really helpful for me. I mean, I've noticed a lot of, to be totally honest, I'll tell you, it was sort of a revelation to me. About 2 weeks ago, I flipped on a Groove Drumming video. He's a great drummer. Canadian fella. I have roots in Canada. Great drummer, though. And he's great with his Zeppelin stuff. I mean, he really is. But the way it kind of with him, I almost see him as sort of like he's a very talented kind of, really sort of Buddy Ritchie, Gene Krupa influence, like a more big band kind of guy, who I think is kind of like, oh, and by the way, folks, here's some Led Zeppelin stuff. On my end, I'm like dedicated to it. Like, hey, it's only Zeppelin. Let's be freaks about Zeppelin. To him, I think he's kind of just, so he nails that stuff, But my point is that when I would see other solos this guy did, I'd be like, wow, he's got a lot of like swung chops. And sort of the concept of sort of marrying for practice, at least practice purposes, is, all right, well, pick a tempo where you practice, you do certain things like single strokes and some rudiments and flams. That also might coincidentally be a tempo that when you actually play a song to a metronome, it might be an awkward one. Like I know with me, I'll have if I'm between 98 beats per minute and 140, I find it real easy to play to a click track if I haven't practiced a little bit. But suddenly if you go in, with a band and they're like, oh, well, here it is, we're going to do 70 beats per minute, and you have a click that's like, I mean, it can be hard. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, so you have to kind of go through each one of these tempos, work your way down. If you're good at it's almost like stretching out a vocal range. People sort of work on their high end and their low end. They stretch it's the same thing with this. If you're good at 115, then you start to notice certain, eighth notes into eighth note triplets start to fall apart. Like da 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 da. At certain tempos, you'll find that you can't do those so well. Kind of to your surprise, like, oh my God, that's bizarre. That's a slow time. So those are the combining, working at stuff, certain rudimental stuff, or even single strokes, and very simple rudiments at slower tempos in a musical context makes it a lot more interesting for the drummer, but you're killing two birds with one stone. You're doing some rudiments, but you're also really firming up your time. So, what I'm going to do, I just found one which is nice, and I used to do this a while back, but I don't know, maybe I just really want to get my technique up, because I don't want this to be like an excuse. I mean, I swear, this really does mess with my buzz rolls, but I certainly don't want to be like, well, I can't do that, double stroke and Achilles because my left hand, I mean, thank God I have one. You know what I'm saying? All right, so what? All right, here we go. Hang on a second. Now, bear with me. Bear with me. Here we go. 3, 4, and a 1, and a 2, and a 3. just got off it. You know what I'm saying? But if you do this a few times, you'll kind of just start letting it flow, and you're really ironing out your technique within a metronome concept. Not for the purpose of turning you into a robot they're going to Pro Tool anyway, but a metronome's always been a great way for everybody to really, even if you have great time, you know, occasionally, like, the emotion of music will sometimes trump your, at least with me, it'll trump my tempo. If we're jamming a tune live, and we're coming into a big part that is just, I really like in the song, I'm going to bump it up 5 beats per minute, pretty abruptly. So, this is just a good exercise to round out your time, but again, employ a enjoyable, slow tempo to really iron out the perfections, or the imperfections, in basic, you know, paradiddles, maybe a double paradiddle, paradiddle diddle, doubles, and singles. Kind of just that. Maybe a flam every now and then, but play it sort of as you're playing, you know, almost like a composition. So you might be like, 1 and 2 and. Trying to make this a helpful video. All BONZOLEUM stuff aside, don't get me wrong. Where's the hat? Ah! But this is really important. So, I mean, I really think this is a good way to iron out time, because I always see people just going to a metronome, going, and then they move the tempo, and then they're like, a little faster, which is great. If you're like one of those, oftentimes musicians, more creative or spastic, or like, I think oftentimes it's mutually exclusive. You have people that in the world who are able to pick up, like almost like learn to juggle without getting frustrated, because they see it as a real interesting thing. Not something like you just want to do so you can do something else with it, like musicians, you know what I mean? So often really good, I think, musicians have a really, you know, like it's the attention deficit video I made. It was kind of supposed to be a joke, but not really. Because a lot of musicians are like that, especially drummers. So for us drummers, also work on your technique and your time in a more Montessori organic sense, as I'm demonstrating. So instead of, you know, doing these things straight in a linear order in the book, which is great, because that's designed, I think, for people, especially back in the day, and for people in general, who sometimes need that on the front end. I mean, I know I needed that on the front end, but then I just think eventually we should sort of graduate onto, I shouldn't say graduate, because I certainly haven't graduated that book. My point being, graduated to maybe a different way laterally, okay? So I had it going, accent, accent, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, okay? And sometimes when you're playing, you can also play around that. Then make the accent the of 1. So instead of like 1, you'd be like 1, 2, 3, but so you treat it as like a like this. You know what I mean? Like just move, play around it. So it relatively moves. Like you'll shift the 1 to the E and then that'll make the and that kind of thing. So, but then eventually when you get more comfortable with it, I'm nervous now because I'm making a video. But let's say I just sort of like try to mellow. So I think this is very helpful. If you're, well, why am I turning that off? If you're a spaz, like me, I find it extremely helpful. Because again, you know, that mechanism of us, especially drummers, goes where you sort of, like, you kind of lose your spasticity for a minute, and you get a book, and somebody loans you a drum book, and you're like, wow, a paradiddle-diddle. And for like an hour and a half, you sort of work on it. You seem like you're making a little progress, but you're like, you know, gosh damn it, I can't do this. And you don't, maybe it's just the Irish way, and I don't mean that against Irish people, because I'm 100% Irish. But it's just like you don't, in the end, you sort of look like I was being a baby. Like, of course you need to practice it. But you really, it's one of those things where after an hour and a half, you really lose the desire to do it. And then, you know, then when you subsequently, you're like, well, it must be really hard. You know, I tried doing it forever. And you go back in time, it's an hour and a half, not forever, you know. So anyway, my idea is to incorporate what I think is good for me. Like working on a groove, right? Just a groove anyway. Maybe there's a couple dimensions. One, where you place the time. If you can kind of work playing a teeny bit ahead of the click, a little behind at points, you know, maybe, you know, try to do it. It's more like a, and then what you do is you practice like your meter / rudiments, right? Boom, boom, ba, boom, boom, ba, boom, boom, bum, ba, 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 boom, boom, ba, 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 ba. I kind of go through some of that stuff. And then maybe work on some of your favorite fills or whatever you do. And just play time, cool time. I mean, when I say cool time, I just kind of mean like boom. But I can't sit there, I'm not a jazz guy. So if you want to put a click on your swing, I guess you could. But anyway, I hope this video was helpful. Okay, so hopefully it just doesn't seem too lame, because I was sort of in a let's really make a quality video today. So hopefully it's a quality video.